Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this particular tutorial, which is tutorial 2, we're going to go over a number of items, including linking, setting up predecessors, which we did in the tutorial 1, work breakdown structure. But we're going to add a few things. We're going to show you how to insert columns, the different types of predefined columns there are in Microsoft Project. And we're going to give you an introduction to the calendar function so you can put in holidays, non-working days, and adjust the calendar. You can set up a custom calendar for a resource or to apply to an activity. And we're also going to give a quick introduction to maneuvering some of the different screens in MS Project. In upcoming videos, we're going to be looking at a number of the different screens and how you access them. So just getting used to the different screens can be very, very helpful for you as you learn and develop your skills using a scheduling software such as Microsoft Project. So some of the things that we looked at in the last particular session was the development of a work breakdown structure, which included indenting activities. So you just basically click on that indent icon. You have to be in the task tab. We reviewed in the first tutorial the different task tabs. Everything that you want to find about a task is under the task tab, and then you got the resource, report, project, etc. So we're in the task tab. We just indented. You'll notice that there's these little thumbnails that are there, thumbtacks, and that essentially says these activities are in manual mode, so we discussed that as well. You typically don't want to have your activities in manual mode. You usually want to have them in auto schedule. So I could change them all quite easily. I could either individually do it or I could highlight them as I just did. A quick way to highlight everything on your screen is you just click I call it the square icon box over here. Very useful. Click it, it highlights everything. And then once everything is highlighted, you can go auto schedule and everything will be auto scheduled. You can also ensure that new tasks are auto scheduled by going down to the bottom left of your screen here and selecting auto schedule. So that essentially means that once you do that, all new activities will be auto scheduled. So for example, if I had install insulation here, it's going to show up as auto schedule. We also in the last tutorial went over the different ways that you can enter durations. Just entering a number will enter days, or putting 5D will put 5 days, or 5W will put 5 weeks. As an example, if I put 5W here, you'll see something show up for 5 weeks. Same thing for hours, 5H, 5M for minutes, and 5MO for months. But we typically schedule most things in days, but again, it depends what you're doing. And in construction projects, usually it's in days, sometimes weeks, but usually days is much more specific. You usually don't get down to the minutia of hours unless it's some special activity or some special process that you're putting together. So I'm just going to quickly put in some durations here just to mix things up a little bit. We'll assume it's a big bathroom, so we'll make them a little bit longer durations here, and than they probably would be. I'm going to allocate 5 days for the inspections to take place. We talked about milestones, 0 duration. It'll give you a diamond signal if you do the 0 duration here. And then install insulation I'm going to put down as 1 day. Okay. And so they're all listed, but they're all starting on the same date. And so they're starting on today's date. So if you want to put a project start date, you would go under what makes sense, under the project tab, because it's global to the project. You would click the project information box, and where it says start date, you pick your start date. So let's say I wanted to start this project June 22nd. So I'm going to click June 22nd, and I'm going to click OK. You'll notice here it says calendar, it says standard. There are 3 calendars that are by default in Microsoft Project: standard, night shift, 24-hour. But you can create calendars, as we'll show you in a few minutes, of whatever type you want. There's no limits to what you can do with calendars, really. And so we're going to schedule from the project start date. I would strongly advise that's the way you set up your scheduling software, like however you set up your project file. You want everything scheduled from a start date going forward. You could schedule it from a finish date and that'll put everything backwards. But the logic and the way that things are calculated also go in reverse. So if you're not used to that, then that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. It's not going to be as soon as possible, it's as late as possible, and it works backwards. You'll find that scheduling from a finish date, maybe if you're a wedding planner or something of that nature, you might want to think about it in those terms, that you've got the hall rented on that date. But other kinds of projects, IT projects, construction projects, what have you, we schedule from a project start date, and then we see where it lands, and if it's not, we're not happy with the finish date, then we adjust things so that we can make it finish on that particular date. So we look at it if it's possible. Okay, so right now we've got the start date June 22nd. I'm going to click OK, and when I do, you'll see that all of these, the start date will change to June 22nd, right? So all of those changed, and by the way, you can adjust the columns just the way you would in Excel, just by pulling the columns left or right. So that's kind of similar. I'm going to make all of these start one after the other. I think I showed you in tutorial 1 how you can set up predecessors. So I highlighted everything underneath the summary task, bathroom remodel. And I'm going to go to the task tab and click on the indent icon. Oh, not the indent icon. I'm going to click on, I'll just click on do here. Get that out of there. I'm going to click on the link icon right here. So I'm going to link the activities, and this is a quick way of linking one right after the other. So if I click on that, one goes right after the other very quickly. I could have just typed in the numbers here. Remember, these are ID numbers. It's kind of like student IDs or a database system. Microsoft Project works like a database system. Even though it looks a little bit like a spreadsheet, it works much more like a database system. And so every activity is given a unique number here on the side, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The numbers may adjust when you insert new tasks and things, but it does all the calculations for you. But if you're going to put a reference point, you don't put the reference that it's demolished bathroom, you put the reference that it's number 2, which is demolished bathroom. So we've got those activities listed one after the other in sequence, and maybe that's not what we want. Maybe we want to have these activities go at the same time. Maybe it's a big bathroom. And inspections, we want 4, 5, I'm just going to go 4, 5, and you see how that has put those connections as successors to this activity here. So inspections has rough-in electrical, rough-in plumbing, and rough-in HVAC as predecessors. They start before it. Now, actually, it doesn't have rough-in HVAC. You see, I only put 4 and 5. So 4 and 5. Do you see how that looks like it's connected there, doesn't it? Well, it's not, because it doesn't say number 6. It should say number 6. If I actually change this to 5 days, watch what happens. It just pushes that out. So it's not connected there. And it's very important that it actually connects there. If you don't connect it there, then that's what we call an open end. So let's say this was 2 days. It would be sitting there and it wouldn't be connected to the rest of the project. So it won't, when you update the project, show the impact that the change has on it. So right from the beginning, I want you to start thinking that all the activities, if they're part of the project, they need to be completed at some point. They need to connect to something. They need to have a successor. If they don't have a successor, then you have an open end, and your critical path could be flawed. This is not showing the critical path right now. And the critical path is the longest path through our project. And it's fundamental to any kind of scheduling software. That's how the calculations are done. In another tutorial, we'll look more deeply at the critical path. If I wanted to show the critical path, I could go to the Format tab here, and click on critical tasks. And now I can see the critical path. That's the longest path through my project. So you see, if I change this to 3 days, it doesn't show that as red because it's not connected. And if I make this 5 days, it's still not connected. But I am saying that I can't do my inspections until all of these are done, then that's not right. What would actually happen is if I connected it properly and I went 4, 5, 6, it changes all my dates. So it's important that you have no open ends in your project. And if I go back here, you see that there's 2 critical paths because they're both the same length of time. That would be, in this instance, correct for how I wanted to sequence my activities. So the critical path connections and ensuring that you have all the connections in place is important. The other thing I wanted to show you today was you can customize and insert columns. So just like, it's pretty much like you would in Excel. You can right click your mouse button or the right tab button on a laptop. And if you right click, you go insert column. It's the same idea as Excel, except the columns in Microsoft Project, they're all predefined. So in this case, I would like to insert the successor column. And you have to, the hard part about this is because there's hundreds of columns, and to be honest, it's not like I use every single column. There's certain columns that I never use, and a lot of columns that I never use. But the ones I do use, I get to know the first letter of them and the name of them, and then I can quickly find them. So I want to insert the successor column, so I type S, and it'll bring up all the ones that start with an S, and then I'll just click on successors. And you notice here it's got all these numbers already in place, and it's saying what are the successors. So it's saying for frame walls, as an example, I have rough-in electrical, rough-in plumbing, rough-in HVAC as a successor. That means these succeed, come after that. Whereas looking at it from the other way, rough-in electrical, rough-in plumbing, rough-in HVAC all have frame walls as a predecessor. So one is looking forward, the other is looking backward. MS Project will automatically put in your successors when you put in your predecessors. So you have to see that as a point. Now, a good thing to remember is if, for example, rough-in HVAC, you remember how I didn't have a connection there before? Well, wrong one, let's see. Where I didn't have number 6 connected. So I'm just going to click there and I'm going to back up, press enter. You notice how when I don't have that successors is blank. So this is one way that you can check to make sure you don't have any open ends, so you don't get fooled by the scaling of the bar chart. Usually looking at the bar chart is okay, but this is a good example of where you could miss it, right? So if I insert my successor column, I can very quickly look down my activity list and I can see that successor, there isn't a successor here. Now, of course, on the last activity, there won't be any successors. So, because there's nothing, that's the end. And on the first activity, there won't be any predecessors. The headings, if I've done the headings, like the summary tasks really well, then I shouldn't have anything linked to the summary tasks. We'll talk about that in another tutorial as well. It's best not to link to summary tasks. You can, the program lets you, but it's best practice not to. And I'll stick to what's a best practice in my discussions on tutorials. And I'll tell you also where there's some things that are done that are a little bit more flexible. So I'll tell you good best practices, etc. All right, so we've got the no successor there. I want to put inspections as a successor, so I'm going to type in number 7 here. And you notice that automatically put number 6 as a predecessor, so it fills that information in there. Okay, so we've done that part. We know how to insert a column. By the way, you can delete columns too. So I just click on the column at the top, I press delete. It's not like Excel that it's deleted for good, it's just deleted from view. It's almost like it's hidden. You can right click and you can go insert column again, S for successors, put it back and it's back. You can click on it, delete it, click on the delete button and it goes from view. You'll see as you get more advanced and in further tutorials, I like to customize my different screens so that I have certain columns in play so I can look at them as I'm doing certain things. So there's always different ways that you might want to customize it, but I don't always want to have them always on my screen, because the more columns I have, the less I can see of the Gantt chart. And I like to see the Gantt chart as well. So, and you can just pull this bar left to right to size up your screen if you want to have the Gantt chart bigger or smaller. The other thing that you can do with the Gantt chart is you can size it up by scaling it. The bottom right corner here, you'll see minus and plus is a zoom. So you can plus, make it more close up, or you can hit minus and zoom it in. You can zoom it really small. So you can imagine if you had, say, a construction project that was 2 years long, hard to see, everything would be stretched out very, very long. So you can always just scale it one way or the other. It doesn't change any of the information, it's just changing how you view the Gantt chart. In another tutorial, I'll go through some of the other customizations and quick ways of referencing and changing the scale on the Gantt chart. You can really customize things up for your own purposes with the Gantt chart. So the other thing I wanted to cover off today was calendars. And so to go to calendars, we just go to project, because calendars have to do with the whole project. It'd be kind of nice if Microsoft Project called it calendar, but for other reason they just call it change working time, which is your calendars. If I click on that, you'll see that you brings up the calendar date, and it says which calendar you're in. As I said earlier, there's 3 calendars: standard, night shift, 24-hour. And so you can, it gets a little bit tricky to get used to this, but in the calendar view, you can adjust your calendar. What you really want in scheduling software, you want to have all of your non-working days put in at the start of a project. If you work for, I know for construction companies, or you work in a project-based company, even in IT where you do nothing but projects, probably a good thing would be to start out with a template file where you put in all of your standard holidays and days off that your company maybe does. You know, for example, if you close down on December 24th and you don't open up till January 2nd, you should close that whole time off so that nothing gets scheduled during that time. Otherwise, you'd go on holidays and you'll come back and you're about a week and a half behind schedule if you didn't do that, because it's counting that you would have worked that day and you didn't. So with our calendar, what you can do is you put in your holidays. So let's say, for example, in Canada, we celebrate January 1st. In the States, you would celebrate January 4th. So you might make a determination. All right, well, even us here, we might determine, well, we're going to take Friday off instead of the 1st. And you might decide you're going to take the Monday off or the Friday off. So if that's going to be a holiday, you'd put in July 3rd. And I'll put in Canada Day in this case. You could put in July 4th for your celebrations, depending where it is. And click Start, and it's got July. In this case, we've got July 3rd, because that's the day we intend to take off. And that would be Canada Day. You should see a hatching. It should reflect this. It means it's a non-working day. So you notice the weekends, they're non-working days. This is a non-working days. It's been edited. And that's good. Let's say the first Monday in August is a holiday, so we call it civic holiday. So if we get that first Monday in August off, whatever days you want to put as your holidays, your company, if they don't get that off, or whatever holidays, the important thing is whatever your company or your business is doing, you put in all of the holidays to reflect that for the whole project. So I put that holiday. Maybe I'll go to Labor Day, common holiday. We both celebrate Labor Day. First month. That's always the first Monday in September. So some of these holidays, maybe you've got a company in your project base and you'd like to do a template file for the next 5 years. Well, what you could do is you could speed the process up substantially on days like that. So like Labor Day is always the first Monday in September. If you're in the exceptions tab, which is where you should be, not the work weeks, the exceptions tab, you can go to details. And in details, you can say that this holiday on September 7th, right, is yearly. So it happens every year, and it always happens on the first Monday of September. You could say give this 5 years, 5 occurrences. If I click OK, now if I go to September 2021, it should be showing that that's a holiday. So you see how that's showing as a holiday? So I could go for the next 5 years and it will show a holiday. So that's a quick way on bigger projects, or if you're making a template file, to be able to put it in multiple days. You could also, you know, if it was July 4th and it's always on July 4th, you could do the same thing under details by clicking yearly. And see, in this case it says July 3rd because that's what I put. The only problem is that with those ones you got to be kind of careful because they end up falling on a Saturday, and then if your company takes the Friday or the Monday off, then you got to make sure you put it in manually for those dates. You want to make sure that every day is accounted for. So you have to be a little bit careful of those kind of things that are unique for your particular business. And as I said, you might have something, for example, in the holidays. So maybe your company actually shuts down between Christmas and New Year's. So then in a case like that, you put Christmas holidays, and then you go to this one over here where it says finish, and you'd say, okay, so when are we coming, what are we taking off to? We're taking off till January 1st. And so if you do that, you notice it takes it right off to January 1st, and it goes over to the 2nd and the 3rd. If you only wanted the 25th and you only wanted the 1st of January, then you'd only put those 2 days. So that's how you put in holidays. You've got to, once you've done that, click OK. When you click OK, you notice it changed my finish date a little bit, because what happened is it put in that 1 day as a holiday. Oops, I shouldn't have done that. And so on your screen, if you actually zoom in, you'll see that this is showing as a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. You can see the hatching there on your screen. So that's showing that that is actually taken off as a holiday. So that would extend your project another day, because you'd have to have another working day. That Friday is no longer a working day. So keep that in mind as well for your projects. Okay. So we covered off how we can put in holidays, and we covered off the aspect of making it longer or shorter. Let's go back to change working time. And let's say we wanted to create a special calendar. So we're going to go create new calendar. And we're going to say copy as standard. That's fine. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to call this the electrical sub calendar. And make a copy. If I make a copy, it'll keep all of these holidays in it. So I want to keep all of these holidays in it, but there's going to be something special about the electrical sub calendar. I'm going to click OK. And you notice here now there's 4 calendars. So we just created a new calendar. It's got all the holidays, but I'm going to say that this electrical subcontractor does not work Fridays. They got this thing, they don't work Fridays. And actually, some unions have that where they work for 10-hour days instead of working Fridays. They always have a long weekend. Kind of cool. But let's say that this electrical sub never works on Fridays. So in that case, I shouldn't go to exceptions. I should go to work weeks. Work weeks, and see where it says default? I'm going to go to details. And I'm going to say on Friday, set Fridays to non-working time. So I'm going to set Fridays to non-working time, and I'm going to click OK. Notice now all the Fridays are hatched out and they're non-working time. So I'm going to click OK on that. That's not going to change anything on my schedule right now because it's the electrical subcontractor. So for now, I'm just going to, there's fancier ways we can do this when we get into resources, but for now, I just wanted to show you, if I double click on Rough-in Electrical, the activity, brings up the task information box. And this is a good time to introduce this box. We're going to come back to this a number of times in the tutorials. In the task information box, it gives you all the properties about that task. It gives you a lot of information, even so much information that you don't really want to know, to be honest, at some level. But if we look at the Advanced tab, which really isn't that advanced, you use it all the time. It says constraint type as soon as possible. We'll get into constraints soon enough in another tutorial. But it says calendar none. Calendar none's a little bit of a misnomer because we're actually using the standard calendar by default. I'll show you that in the project information box again in a minute. But it says none. I could put the standard calendar, but it's already using the standard calendar, so I don't need to. I'm going to put the electrical sub calendar. All right, and I'm just going to see if I can move this down a little bit. So right now, see this electrical sub work? It's on a Friday. They're working on a Friday, Monday and Tuesday. So I'm going to say, you know what? The electrical sub is doing the electrical work. I'm going to apply to this activity that calendar, and I'm going to click OK. So this really should make this a non-working day only for the electrical sub. Everybody else is going to work, and it should push the electrical sub so that they're working now all the way to Wednesday if it's working. Let's see if it does. So you see what it did? It pushed the electrical sub out. It changed the finish date of my project. It changed the critical path because this is no longer on the critical path. So it did a number of things, that one change. And it put in this column, we call this column the indicator column, a little graphic that if I hover over it says calendar, electrical sub calendar assigned to the task. So that's a reminder for you to know that that electrical sub calendar has been applied to that task. Because you'll forget and you'll wonder what's going on. Why is that not there? Because it doesn't hatch out the day because it's only applied to that activity. Every other activity is following the standard calendar. Some of the problems or issues you may find when you add standard calendars, it kind of changes the properties of the critical path, which sometimes can confuse the program a little bit. Like it won't show that these two are critical activities when really they still are, because this is locked in as a start date. It's locked out of the Friday. So sometimes there's some nuances. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the critical path aspect of scheduling. But really the critical path is following through these activities through here and through there. Okay, and if you had this in here and you didn't want it to be in there anymore, you could just go back to the calendar and just say none, and then that should take it out, and then it moves it back. And you see how those turned red again? If I go to the project tab, you see project information. That's where I was telling you the whole project, unless told otherwise, is using the standard calendar. So I don't have to go in and tell these activities standard, standard, standard. They're already using the standard calendar. I only have to go in and tell them if they're using a special calendar. So hopefully that's given you a good idea of the linking. We reviewed that. If you want more information on the linking and the WBS, go back to tutorial 1 on my YouTube channel, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's helpful for you to be able to get new information and new updates. I'm going to be updating very frequently, most likely at least weekly, with Microsoft project tutorials, project management tutorials, and business management tutorials to help you in these particular areas. So hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial, and looking forward to helping engage you in the future. Bye for now.